Family is the foundation upon which we build our lives. Yet sometimes circumstances beyond our control tear that foundation apart. What happened on a Family Feud stage in September 2024 would remind millions of viewers that it is never too late to heal broken bonds, never too late to seek forgiveness, and never too late to rebuild what was lost. When 58-year-old Marcus Thompson walked onto the Family Feud stage as part of the competing Johnson family team, he expected nothing more than an entertaining afternoon of friendly competition and perhaps a chance to win some money for his relatives. What he did not expect was to come face to face with the daughter he had not seen in 18 years. The moment Steve Harvey recognized what was happening, he made an unprecedented decision that would halt production and transform a game show, taping into one of the most powerful moments of reconciliation ever captured on television. This is not just a story about a chance encounter. It is a story about the long road of personal redemption, the courage it takes to face past mistakes, and the extraordinary grace required to forgive. It is a reminder that healing is always possible when people are willing to be vulnerable and honest about their pain. Marcus Thompson's life had followed a trajectory that many recognize but few want to discuss openly. In his 20s and 30s, he had struggled with alcohol addiction, a disease that destroyed his first marriage and fractured his relationship with his only daughter, Maya. The details of his decline are important not to sensationalize his struggles but to understand the context of what would later unfold on that Family Feud stage. Marcus had been a promising electrician with his own small business in Detroit, Michigan. He had married his high school sweetheart, Jennifer, and they had welcomed their daughter Maya in 1998. For the first 8 years of Maya's life, Marcus had been a present and loving father. Friends and family described him as devoted, always attending Maya's school events and spending weekends teaching her to ride a bike and helping with homework. The addiction began gradually, as these things often do. Work stress led to social drinking, which led to drinking alone, which eventually spiraled into dependency. By the time Maya was 10 years old, Marcus's behavior had become erratic and unreliable. He missed important events. He made promises he could not keep. His business suffered, and financial strain added pressure to an already fragile family situation. When Maya was 12 years old, Jennifer made the difficult decision to leave Marcus and file for divorce. The court granted her full custody, with Marcus receiving supervised visitation rights. For 2 years, Marcus saw his daughter in supervised settings, watching her grow more distant with each meeting. The bright, talkative girl who had once run to hug him now sat quietly across the table, answering his questions with one-word responses. The final break came when Maya was 14. After Marcus failed to show up for 3 consecutive scheduled visits, Maya told her mother she no longer wanted to see him. Jennifer, trying to protect her daughter from further disappointment, did not force the issue. Marcus, drowning in shame and addiction, did not fight it. He convinced himself that Maya was better off without him. The years that followed represented the darkest period of Marcus's life. He lost his business, moved between temporary jobs, and lived in a series of small apartments. The addiction consumed everything good in his life, leaving only regret and self-loathing. He had no contact with Maya during these years. Her birthday cards went unanswered. His attempts to call were blocked. He had become a ghost in his daughter's life. The turning point came 6 years ago, when Marcus, then 52 years old, hit what recovery counselors call rock bottom. After a health scare that landed him in the hospital, he entered a rehabilitation program. The road to sobriety was not smooth or simple. It required Marcus to confront not just his addiction, but the underlying pain and trauma that had fueled it. It required him to face the reality of all the harm he had caused, particularly to Maya. Recovery programs emphasize making amends to those you have hurt, but Marcus faced a unique challenge. Maya had made it clear through her mother that she did not want contact with him. Respecting her boundaries while dealing with his own guilt became part of his ongoing recovery work. His counselor helped him understand that amends sometimes means respecting someone's need for space and focusing on becoming the person you should have been all along. Marcus rebuilt his life piece by piece. He got certified in HVAC repair and found steady work. He joined a support group that met twice weekly. He volunteered at a community center, mentoring young people struggling with addiction. He did not do these things to earn redemption or to prove anything to anyone. He did them because recovery had taught him that true change happens through consistent action, not grand gestures. Marcus had maintained relationships with his extended family throughout his recovery. His cousin, Robert Johnson, had been particularly supportive, offering encouragement without judgment and helping Marcus stay accountable. When Robert's family was selected to appear on Family Feud, he invited Marcus to join them as part of the team. Robert thought it would be a fun experience and a celebration of how far Marcus had come in his recovery. Marcus agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to do something normal and joyful with family who had stood by him. He had no way of knowing that this decision would lead to the most significant moment of his life since beginning his recovery journey. While Marcus was working on his recovery, Maya had been building her own life. The absence of her father had shaped her in complex ways. She had graduated high school with honors, earned a degree in social work, and now worked as a counselor for at-risk youth. Those who knew her story often remarked that she had turned her pain into purpose, using her experiences to help others navigate difficult family situations. Maya rarely spoke about her father. When asked, she would say simply that he was not part of her life, and she had made peace with that. But making peace with absence is not the same as healing from abandonment. Maya carried wounds that she had learned to manage, but had never fully addressed. At 32 years old, Maya was engaged to be married. Her fiancé, David, was a teacher who had encouraged her to consider therapy to work through her feelings about her father before their wedding. Maya had been hesitant, but she loved David and wanted to enter their marriage without unresolved emotional baggage. She had recently started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma and addiction. One of the therapeutic exercises her counselor suggested was to attend events that brought her joy and allowed her to be present in the moment. Maya loved game shows and had always wanted to attend a live taping of Family Feud. When tickets became available for a September taping in Los Angeles, David surprised her with a trip. They planned to make a weekend of it, combining the show taping with some sightseeing. Neither Marcus nor Maya knew the other would be at that Family Feud taping on the 15th of September 2024. Marcus was focused on supporting his cousin's family. Maya was simply looking forward to seeing Steve Harvey live and enjoying a fun afternoon with her fiancé. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. The atmosphere in a Family Feud studio is designed to be energetic and exciting. The audience arrives early, goes through a warm-up routine with a producer who teaches them when to clap and cheer, and then waits in anticipation for Steve Harvey to make his entrance. Maya and David were seated in the third row, close enough to see everything clearly, but not so close that cameras would focus on them frequently. The Johnson family was competing against another family from Texas. Marcus stood in the lineup with his cousin Robert, Robert's wife Patricia, and two of Robert's adult children. He was nervous, but excited, grateful to be included in this experience, and hopeful that his family might win some money. It happened during the second round of the game. A camera panned across the audience to capture reaction shots, a standard practice during tapings. The image appeared on the monitors that allowed the studio audience to see what viewers at home would see. Maya, laughing at one of Steve Harvey's jokes, appeared on screen for just a few seconds. Marcus, waiting for his turn to approach the podium, glanced at the monitor as the camera swept the crowd. In that brief moment, he saw a face that he had memorized years ago. A face he had watched grow from childhood into adolescence through school photos that Jennifer had occasionally shared before cutting off contact completely. Time slowed as Marcus's brain processed what his eyes were seeing. His daughter, his Maya, right there in the audience. The recognition hit Marcus like a physical blow. His knees weakened. His breathing became rapid and shallow. Robert, standing next to him, noticed immediately that something was wrong. Marcus's face had gone pale, and his hand was gripping the podium edge with such force that his knuckles were white. Marcus's mind raced through a series of thoughts and emotions in the span of seconds. After 18 years of no contact, after all the work he had done in recovery, after all the times he had imagined what he might say if he ever saw Maya again, here she was. But was this the right moment? Was this the right way? Would she even want to see him? Would this traumatize her further? The studio lights suddenly felt too bright. The audience noise became overwhelming. Marcus struggled to stay present, to not let the panic overwhelm him. His recovery training kicked in. Breathe. Stay grounded. Feel your feet on the floor. But nothing in his recovery work had prepared him for this specific situation. Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud long enough to recognize when something was not right with a contestant. He noticed Marcus swaying slightly, noticed the change in his complexion, noticed how Robert had moved closer to steady him. Steve's first concern was for Marcus's health. He had seen contestants faint before, had dealt with medical emergencies during tapings. Steve approached Marcus during a pause between questions. Speaking quietly, he asked if Marcus needed to step aside, if he was feeling ill, if he needed medical attention. Marcus, trying to compose himself, shook his head, but Steve could see that whatever was happening went beyond simple nerves or physical illness. It was Robert who leaned in and whispered to Steve, explaining in a few quick sentences what was happening. Marcus had just seen his daughter, from whom he had been estranged for 18 years, sitting in the audience. He did not know she would be there. He had not seen or spoken to her since she was a teenager. Steve Harvey faced an immediate decision that had no clear right answer. On one hand, he had a show to tape, a schedule to maintain, a production team expecting a certain flow. Game shows operate on tight schedules and budgets. Stopping production is not taken lightly. On the other hand, Steve was witnessing something that transcended entertainment. This was a human moment of profound significance. Whatever happened next could either facilitate healing or cause further harm. The decision required wisdom, not just adherence to protocol. Steve looked at Marcus, whose eyes had filled with tears despite his efforts at composure. He looked at the production booth, where the director and producers were watching, likely wondering why the game had paused. He thought about Maya, sitting in the audience with no idea that her father was standing on the stage. Maya had not noticed Marcus yet. The Johnson family all looked vaguely familiar in the way that large extended families sometimes do, but she had not registered Marcus specifically. She was enjoying the show, laughing at Steve Harvey's reactions, leaning against David's shoulder during breaks in taping. When Steve stopped the game and asked for a moment, Maya assumed it was a normal production pause. Perhaps equipment needed adjustment or someone needed to use the restroom. She pulled out her phone to check messages, comfortable in her ignorance of what was unfolding on stage. Steve Harvey made his choice. He walked over to the production booth and spoke directly to the director. The conversation was brief but firm. Steve explained the situation and made it clear that he would not continue the game until this family matter was addressed properly. The cameras needed to stop rolling. The audience needed to understand what was happening. This moment needed to be handled with care and dignity, not captured for entertainment value. This decision reflected something important about Steve's character and values. He had built his career on entertainment, but he had also built it on authenticity and respect for human dignity. He understood that some moments are too sacred to be reduced to content. Steve Harvey's authority on his show is absolute. When he told the production team to cut the cameras and pause the taping, they complied immediately. This was unprecedented in the show's history. Family Feud tapings occasionally paused for technical issues or contestant illness, but never for something like this. Steve addressed the studio audience directly. He explained that something significant was happening that required sensitivity and privacy. He asked for their patience and understanding. The audience, sensing the gravity in his voice, fell silent. Steve asked Marcus to step aside from the game area to a quiet corner of the stage. He invited Robert to come along for support. Speaking in low tones that the audience could not hear, Steve asked Marcus what he wanted to do. Did he want to approach Maya? Did he want Steve to speak to her first? Did he want to simply leave and not disrupt her day? Marcus struggled to articulate what he wanted. Part of him desperately wanted to see Maya, to speak to her, to apologize for all the years of absence. Part of him wanted to protect her from any distress this encounter might cause. He had spent 6 years learning to respect boundaries and to put others' needs before his own desires. But he also knew that running away from difficult moments had been a pattern of his addiction years. Robert offered crucial perspective. He reminded Marcus that healing often requires courage from all parties involved. He suggested that at minimum, Maya deserved to know that her father was there and to have the choice of whether to engage or not. Taking away her agency by making the decision for her would not be respectful of her as an adult. Steve listened to this exchange and agreed with Robert's assessment. He suggested that he would speak to Maya first, explain the situation, and let her decide what she wanted to do. He would make it clear that she had no obligation to engage, that she could leave if she wanted, or that she could speak with Marcus if she felt ready. The choice would be entirely hers. Steve Harvey walked into the audience, and people immediately noticed that something unusual was happening. He approached Maya and David's row, and asked to speak with Maya privately. David, protective of his fiancée, started to stand as well, but Steve gently indicated that he needed to speak with Maya alone first. Maya followed Steve to a quiet area near the studio exit, her heart beginning to race. She wondered if something was wrong, if there had been some kind of emergency. Steve's demeanor was serious but kind, and he wasted no time getting to the point. He told her that her father, Marcus Thompson, was on the stage as part of one of the competing families. He had not known she would be in the audience. He had just recognized her moments ago and was deeply shaken by the encounter. Steve explained that he had stopped the taping because he believed this was a moment that needed to be handled carefully and respectfully. Maya's immediate reaction was physical. She felt her stomach drop, felt her hands begin to shake. The last time she had seen her father, she had been 14 years old, angry and hurt, telling her mother she never wanted to see him again. Now she was 32, had built an entire adult life, and suddenly, here he was. Steve gave Maya time to process. He did not rush her or pressure her toward any particular response. He simply stood nearby, offering a supportive presence while she worked through the shock. Maya's mind flooded with memories. Her father, pushing her on the swings at the park. Her father missing her 8th grade graduation. Her father promising to come to her soccer games and then not showing up. Her father's slurred speech on the phone. The smell of alcohol that she had learned to associate with disappointment. But she also thought about the work she had been doing in therapy. Her counselor had talked about how carrying anger and resentment, even justified anger, can become its own burden. They had discussed how forgiveness does not mean excusing harmful behavior, but rather releasing yourself from the weight of constantly reliving past hurts. Maya asked Steve about her father's current state. Was he still drinking? Was he healthy? Steve shared what Robert had told him, that Marcus had been in recovery for 6 years, that he had rebuilt his life, that he had maintained sobriety through consistent work and support. After several minutes of silence, Maya made her decision. She would speak with her father, not because she owed him anything, not because she had forgiven him, but because she was curious about who he had become, and because running from this encounter would mean always wondering what might have happened if she had faced it. She asked Steve if David could be present for the conversation. Steve agreed immediately and went to get David, explaining the situation to him. David, who had heard many stories about Marcus but had never met him, wrapped his arm around Maya's shoulders and told her he would support whatever she needed. Steve Harvey understood that this conversation needed to happen in a controlled environment. He arranged for Marcus and Maya to meet in one of the production offices adjacent to the studio. He would facilitate the initial introduction, and then step back to give them privacy while remaining available if needed. The production team had been informed that the taping would resume after this matter was resolved. Some crew members were frustrated by the delay, but most understood that they were witnessing something more important than television scheduling. When Marcus and Maya finally stood face to face for the first time in 18 years, the moment was almost too heavy to bear. Marcus looked at his daughter, now a grown woman, and saw both the child he remembered and a stranger he had never known. Maya looked at her father and saw a man who seemed smaller and older than the figure from her memories, someone who looked both familiar and foreign. Steve made brief introductions. Marcus, this is Maya and her fiancé David. Maya, as you know, this is your father Marcus. Then Steve stepped back, giving them space while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity but was perhaps only 30 seconds. It was Maya who spoke first, her voice steady despite the emotions coursing through her. She asked a simple question that carried the weight of 18 years. Why now? Why are you here? Marcus, who had prepared speeches in his mind countless times over the years, found that none of his rehearsed words came. Instead, he spoke from the raw truth of the moment. He explained that he did not know she would be there, that seeing her had been a complete shock, that he had not sought this encounter, but now that it was happening, he was grateful for it. He told her about his recovery, not as an excuse for the past, but as context for who he had become. He acknowledged the pain he had caused, without minimizing it or asking for immediate forgiveness. He told her that he thought about her every day, that her absence from his life was a consequence of his own choices, and that he respected whatever boundaries she needed to maintain. Maya listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished speaking, she took a moment before responding. She told him about her life, about her work, helping young people from difficult family situations, about how his absence had shaped her in ways both painful and purposeful. She did not pretend that everything was suddenly okay because they were talking. She did not offer easy forgiveness or promise a relationship moving forward. What she did offer was acknowledgement. She acknowledged that he had made efforts to change. She acknowledged that addiction is a disease, not simply a moral failure. She acknowledged that the man standing in front of her seemed genuinely different from the father she remembered. This acknowledgement was not absolution, but it was a start. David's presence during this conversation was important. As someone who loved Maya but had no personal history with Marcus, he could listen with some objectivity. At one point, he asked Marcus directly about his recovery program and his support system. This question showed that David was thinking not just about the emotional reunion, but about the practical realities of whether Marcus had genuinely changed or was simply having a good day. Marcus answered honestly, providing details about his sponsor, his regular meetings, his volunteer work, and his employment. He did not embellish or try to paint himself as perfect. He simply presented the facts of his daily efforts to stay sober and live with integrity. As their conversation drew to a close, Maya made a proposal. She was not ready for a full relationship with her father, but she was willing to stay in limited contact, perhaps an email exchange to start, then possibly meeting for coffee in a few months if both felt comfortable. She would set the pace and the boundaries, and Marcus would need to respect them without pressure or expectation. Marcus agreed immediately. He thanked Maya for even being willing to have this conversation, for not simply walking away. He thanked David for supporting Maya and for being willing to be present during such a difficult encounter. He promised to respect whatever boundaries Maya set and to earn back trust through consistent action over time, not through words or promises. When the conversation concluded and Marcus and Maya emerged from the office, Steve was waiting. He pulled them both aside and spoke to them about what he had witnessed. He told them that in all his years in television, he had rarely seen something as brave as what they had just done. Facing painful history requires courage from all parties involved. He offered his own perspective as someone who had made mistakes as a father and had worked to rebuild those relationships. He shared that healing is not linear, that there would likely be difficult moments ahead, but that the willingness to try was itself meaningful. Steve also made an important promise. None of this encounter had been filmed. The production cameras had remained off throughout. This was not content for television, but a private family matter that happened to occur in a television studio. He would ensure that what had happened remained confidential unless Marcus and Maya decided otherwise. After nearly 90 minutes, the Family Feud taping resumed. Steve returned to the stage and explained to the audience that a family matter had required attention and thanked them for their patience. He did not provide details, respecting the privacy of everyone involved. The audience, which had been remarkably patient, applauded. Marcus returned to the game, though his mind was obviously not fully focused on questions about popular survey responses. His family understood and rallied around him, ensuring that the game continued smoothly even if he was distracted. Maya and David remained in the audience, having decided to stay for the remainder of the taping. The Johnson family did not win the game that day. They finished with a respectable score but were ultimately defeated by the other family. In the grand scheme of what had happened that afternoon, the game results seemed almost irrelevant. In the days following the taping, both Marcus and Maya needed time to process what had happened. The shock of the encounter gave way to a complex mixture of emotions. For Marcus, there was hope mixed with fear that he might somehow damage the fragile new connection. For Maya, there was relief at having faced a long-avoided confrontation mixed with uncertainty about what kind of relationship, if any, she wanted with her father. True to her word, Maya sent Marcus an email 3 days after the taping. It was brief and somewhat formal, but it was contact. She asked about his health and his work. She shared a few details about her upcoming wedding plans. She made clear that she was taking things slowly, but was open to continued communication. Marcus responded with equal care, answering her questions without oversharing, expressing interest in her life without being intrusive, and maintaining the boundaries she had established. These early exchanges were stilted and careful, but they were genuine. Maya's therapist had encouraged her to write about the encounter as a way of processing it. In her journal, Maya explored her conflicting feelings. She wrote about the anger she still carried for the years of abandonment. She wrote about the surprise she felt at seeing Marcus looking genuinely different from the man in her memories. She wrote about her fear of being hurt again if she allowed him back into her life, even in a limited way. Through this writing process, Maya came to understand that healing does not require forgetting what happened or pretending that everything is fine. Healing can exist alongside pain. Forgiveness can exist alongside clear boundaries. Hope can exist alongside caution. Marcus, working with his own counselor, also processed the encounter deeply. His therapist helped him understand that Maya's willingness to engage at all was a gift that he should honor through patience and respect. The work now was to demonstrate through consistent action over time that he had genuinely changed, without expecting or demanding that Maya respond in any particular way. As Maya's wedding approached, several months later, she faced a difficult decision. Should she invite her father? She discussed it extensively with David, with her mother, and with her therapist. The opinions varied. Her mother was concerned about potential disruption. David supported whatever Maya decided. Her therapist encouraged her to do what felt right for her, independent of what others thought she should do. Ultimately, Maya decided not to invite Marcus to the wedding ceremony itself, but she did invite him to attend the reception briefly. This compromise felt right to her. The wedding ceremony was intimate and sacred, reserved for people who had been present in her life. The reception was larger and more public, a place where Marcus could be present without taking center stage. Marcus received the invitation with gratitude and humility. He attended the reception for exactly the amount of time Maya had indicated would be appropriate. He brought a thoughtful gift that reflected what he had learned about her, interests from their limited exchanges. He spoke briefly with Jennifer, Maya's mother, in what was undoubtedly an uncomfortable but civil conversation. He met some of Maya's friends and colleagues, introducing himself simply as Maya's father without elaboration. Most importantly, when the designated time came for him to leave, he left without drama or protest. This small act of respecting boundaries spoke volumes about his growth and his commitment to putting Maya's needs first. Several months after the encounter, Steve Harvey reflected on the incident during a speaking engagement. Without naming Marcus or Maya specifically, he shared the story of what had happened at the Family Feud taping. He talked about the decision to stop the cameras, the importance of prioritizing human dignity over content, and the courage it takes to face painful history. His telling of the story resonated with audiences because it touched on universal themes. Many people carry fractured family relationships. Many people wonder if reconciliation is possible after years of silence. Many people struggle with how to balance accountability for past harm with openness to genuine change. Steve emphasized several key principles that he had observed through the encounter. First, timing matters. Some conversations cannot be forced or scheduled, but must happen when both parties are ready. Second, respect for boundaries is essential. Marcus's willingness to let Maya set the pace demonstrated his growth more effectively than any apology could have. Third, healing is not always about restoration. Sometimes healing means finding peace with a limited relationship or even with no relationship at all. Word of the incident began to spread within the Family Feud community and among people who worked in television production. It became a story that production staff shared as an example of when protocol should be set aside for human need. It became a teaching moment about the responsibility that comes with having a platform and the importance of using that platform ethically. Several addiction recovery programs reached out to Marcus to ask if he would be willing to share his story with others in recovery who struggled with estrangement from their children. Marcus, after discussing it with Maya and getting her permission, agreed to speak at a few events. His message was carefully calibrated to focus on his own journey without exploiting Maya's story or implying that reconciliation is always possible or even always advisable. Maya, for her part, found that having faced this encounter helped her in her work with at-risk youth. She had a deeper understanding of how complex family dynamics can be, how people can genuinely change, and how important it is to make space for multiple truths to exist simultaneously. Someone can have caused real harm and also have made genuine efforts to change. Someone can be worthy of acknowledgement for their growth without being entitled to forgiveness or relationship. A year after the Family Feud encounter, Marcus and Maya had settled into a pattern of limited but consistent contact. They exchanged emails every few weeks. They had met for coffee 3 times, always with David present at Maya's request. They had had one phone conversation that lasted nearly an hour, during which they talked about Maya's grandfather, Marcus's father, who had passed away when Maya was young. These interactions were not dramatic or filled with emotional breakthroughs. They were ordinary, and sometimes even boring. They talked about work, stress, and weather, and books they were reading. But in their very ordinariness, they represented something profound. They represented 2 people choosing to build a connection based not on the past or on what might have been, but on who they were in the present moment. Marcus did not attend Maya's first major presentation at a social work conference, though she had invited him. He had a work conflict, and rather than trying to rearrange his schedule and make it into a big gesture, he simply sent her a supportive email and a small bouquet of flowers to her hotel. This restraint, this resistance to grand gestures, showed his understanding that trust is built through small, consistent actions. Maya, in turn, sent Marcus a photograph from her wedding. In the photo, she was dancing with David, laughing with genuine joy. She included a brief note thanking Marcus for respecting her boundaries throughout the process and for the efforts he had made to change his life. She did not say that she had forgiven him. She did not say that everything was okay between them. But she acknowledged his presence in her life, however limited, and that of Marcus and Maya offers several important lessons for anyone navigating family estrangement, addiction, recovery, or the complex process of reconciliation. For those who have caused harm, like Marcus, the lesson is that genuine change requires time, consistency, and respect for the boundaries set by those you have hurt. Healing is not about grand gestures or forcing forgiveness. It is about becoming a person of integrity through daily choices and then giving others the space to respond to that change in their own time and their own way. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is respect someone's need for distance. For those who have been harmed, like Maya, the lesson is that you are under no obligation to reconcile with people who have hurt you, regardless of whether they have changed. Your healing is not dependent on maintaining or rebuilding relationships with people from your past. However, if you do choose to engage, you can do so with clear boundaries that protect your well-being while remaining open to the reality that people can genuinely change. For everyone, the lesson is that healing is not linear, and reconciliation is not always the goal or even always advisable. Sometimes, healing means learning to live with the complexity of holding multiple truths at once. Someone can have been harmful and also be working to change. You can acknowledge someone's growth without excusing their past behavior. You can choose limited contact without committing to a full relationship. Steve Harvey's decision to stop the cameras that day reflected a value system that prioritizes human dignity over entertainment value. In an era where reality television often exploits personal pain for ratings, his choice stood in stark contrast. He understood that some moments are too sacred to be reduced to content, too private to be shared without consent, too complex to be packaged into a narrative arc. His handling of the situation also demonstrated the kind of leadership that creates space for healing. He did not try to force a particular outcome or push for a dramatic reunion that would make good television. He simply created a safe environment where 2 people could make their own choices about how to handle an unexpected encounter. In interviews after the incident, Steve often spoke about how the experience changed him. It reminded him that his platform came with responsibility not just to entertain, but to use his position to facilitate good when opportunities arose. It reinforced his belief that authenticity and genuine care for people resonated more deeply with audiences than manufactured drama. As of the time of this writing, Marcus and Maya continue their careful, boundaried relationship. They have not become close in the way that fathers and daughters who grew up together often are. They may never have that kind of relationship. But they have something valuable nonetheless. They have a connection based on honesty, respect, and mutual acknowledgement of both past harm and present effort. Marcus continues his recovery work. Now with 6.5 years of sobriety, he has been promoted at his job and has become a trusted mentor to others in his recovery community. His life is stable and purpose-driven, built on a foundation of daily practices that keep him grounded and sober. Maya and David are building their life together, recently buying their first home, and talking about starting a family in the next few years. Maya has been promoted to a supervisory role at her agency, where she trains new social workers in trauma-informed care. Her work is informed by her own experiences, but not defined by them. The Family Feud taping where they encountered each other has become a strange footnote in both their lives. It was not the beginning of their healing journey, which both had been working on independently for years. But it was a catalyst, a moment that forced a confrontation that might not have happened otherwise. Whether that confrontation was ultimately beneficial remains something both continue to process. The story of what happened on that Family Feud stage in September 2024 is not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It is a real story about real people navigating the complicated terrain of family, estrangement, addiction recovery, and the possibility of limited reconciliation. It reminds us that life rarely provides the neat resolutions we see in scripted entertainment. Healing is messy, reconciliation is optional, and forgiveness does not erase the past. But it also reminds us that courage, honesty, and respect for boundaries can create space for connection even after years of pain and separation. Marcus and Maya's encounter teaches us that it is never too late to face difficult truths, never too late to attempt connection, and never too late to honor both the harm that was done and the efforts to change. It teaches us that healing does not require forgetting, that forgiveness does not require restored relationship, and that acknowledging someone's growth does not mean excusing their past behavior. Most importantly, it teaches us that small, consistent actions over time matter more than grand gestures. Marcus did not win back his daughter through dramatic declarations or elaborate apologies. He created the possibility of connection through 6 years of daily sobriety, through respecting Maya's boundaries without complaint, and through demonstrating through action that he had genuinely changed. The decision Steve Harvey made that day to stop the cameras reflected an understanding that some moments transcend entertainment. His willingness to prioritize human dignity over production schedules created the space for Marcus and Maya to handle their encounter with privacy and respect. In doing so, he demonstrated the kind of ethical leadership that the entertainment industry needs more of. Leadership that recognizes that real people's real pain deserves to be treated with care, not exploited for content. As we reflect on this story, we are invited to consider our own fractured relationships, our own possibilities for healing, and our own capacity to hold complexity. Not every estranged relationship can or should be reconciled. Not every person who has caused harm has genuinely changed. Not every painful history has a redemptive arc. But some do, and in those cases, having the courage to face difficult truths, the wisdom to respect boundaries, and the patience to let healing unfold in its own time can create something valuable, even if that something looks different from the restored relationship we might have imagined. The cameras may have stopped rolling that day at Family Feud, but the real story continues in the small, ordinary moments between a father and daughter who are slowly, carefully, learning to know each other again.